Bruce, a man from my childhood. So I want to preface before beginning my story that these events took place several decades ago, so I apologize if my memory doesn't serve me as well as it used to. A close friend has heard this story several times over the years and he always recommends telling me this story on Reddit and stuff, so I'm going to give it a shot. Now I'm no Hemingway, but I'll try to make this as narratively interesting as best as I can. Thank you for your patience and feel free to ask questions. I'll do my best to answer them to the best of my ability. I grew up in a smaller town in central Washington, one of those small farming towns you pass by to somewhere more interesting. I was born in the great year of 1970, early December. My family raised cattle and worked construction all of their lives. Humble living, my grandpa always said. My young childhood was closely spent working with my father on the farm, put to work the second I could keep my feet under me. I had two older brothers who truly could only be described as rough around the edges. The entire town knew my brothers, they were loud, brash, and didn't care whose toes they'd step on. As for me, I was a bit more of a mama's boy. Our community was very connected, just a few farmers and their families. We'd meet in the Grange Hall for something we called family lunch, every Sunday after church. If there was a problem, or if someone had a problem, we all knew it before sundown. No story could escape this town's grasp. The wives would meet up and gossip about anything new under the guise of a book club. Because of this, we could never get away from anything. Even back then, before a world before cell phones, it was almost as if we always had cameras on us. That being said, I remember when the whispers around the town started. I believe it started around when I was around 15. This mysterious man was the talk of the town. It all started around the summer of 1984. The only reason I remember that is because it was around the time Bruce Springsteen released his Born in the USA album. This man would wear a white shirt, red hat, with blue jeans and dark brown work boots. Due to this, everyone around here started to call him Bruce. At first, all of us neighborhood kids thought it was another boogeyman tale. Families would tell their kids, "Keep your window closed or Bruce will get ya." None of us really took the story seriously, as kids do. During that time, the only thing we cared about was camping outside in the forest and pretending to be G.I. Joe members in the midst of a heated conflict. Some kids would say that they saw Bruce in the tree line while we were out there, but no one would take them seriously and they'd get called a bitch or something. Even with this, we'd still kinda get that chill down your spine at night, that same chill you'd get when someone was spying on you. In hindsight, even though we teased those kids for saying they saw Bruce, we all still had the fear of him spotting us. I remember thinking I was invulnerable from having Bruce see me due to my window being on the second story of our house, though I still kept my blinds closed just in case. When summer ended and the dreaded school year came back around, the noise of Bruce around the town diminished. I even forgot about him, and it seemed as if the town's resident boogeyman had left as fast as he came. Though there were still those whispers around family lunch. One Sunday afternoon, I remember my father was speaking to one of our neighbors. Davy's son says he saw that man looking through his window the other night. "Ah, that's a load of horseshit and you know it, that whole Bruce thing was a boogeyman story for the kids to behave," my father said. "Maybe, but even Davy seemed shaken up from it," my neighbor retorted. My neighbor was right too. I was close with Johnny, and him and his entire family swore up and down about it. Johnny told me that he woke up early one morning to that chill down his spine. He said, "Dude, it was freaky, he was just standing there, and his hat kinda covered his face so it was hard to see what he looked like." He said that later he screamed for his dad and this dude still just stood there. No reaction or anything, just kept looking directly at Johnny. When his dad finally stumbled into his room, his dad noticed Bruce. He bolted outside with his shotgun in his hand. Johnny said that the man had no reaction to his father either, he just kept standing there, staring intently. By the time their front door opened and the first shot rang out, Bruce was gone. Almost as a ghost, disappearing into fog. Mr. Felterman swore that 1 second the man was there, then when he raised his shotgun and fired, the man disappeared. Johnny's father called the sheriff's office over, but there was no trace of Bruce. The deputy just said if he comes back to call them out first. Johnny told this story probably 100 times that year, yet just like before, everyone would tease him and denied his story. My mother was pretty close to their family, so she tried to keep a short leash on all three of us boys. Funny enough, she'd always say before we'd go anywhere, "Be careful and don't let that pedophile go and get ya." My brothers would always mockingly say, "We'll kill him before he could even touch us, Ma." I don't know if the story of Bruce ever really bothered my brothers as much as it bothered me. Though, even after Johnny's story, I still had a slight bit of skepticism in me. I mean, I never got to see him until later. The first time I ever had a Bruce encounter was later that year during a pretty harsh winter. My father was remodeling our sunroom. Due to that, our front door was plastic tarp stapled on the doorframe. And might I add, it was the absolute worst time to not have a door. Snow would get into the front entrance from the storm the night prior, and the entire house would feel like it was negative 100 degrees. Anyway, I digress. I remember it was the weekend and my birthday was that Friday before. My brothers scraped up some money to rent me the first Indiana Jones movie. Honestly, it was as much of a gift for me as it was for my brothers. My father was out getting supplies for the sunroom and my mother was grocery shopping. My brothers and I were sitting on the couch watching the movie intently. Watching that movie, you could almost see it in my eyes, the dream to be a cool archaeologist just like Harrison Ford, whip and hat included. Now I don't know if it was because we were watching so closely, but we never noticed when our father's pickup pulled up. My father came up and flicked my oldest brother's ears and shouted, "How many times do I have to tell you dipshits to leave your boots outside before coming onto the carpet?" We all stared at each other confused. My father had his arm outstretched and was pointing at a pair of snowprints that had to have been no closer than 7 feet from the back of our couch. The snow hadn't melted and still looked fresh. "Dad, we've been inside for the last dash," my dad interpreted my brother. "Oh, don't give me that bullshit, go clean that up and go help your mother with the groceries." I still remember the look on my brothers' faces as they stared at each other, with maybe bewilderment or maybe fear. I remember lying in bed that night trying to make up a rational explanation on whose footprints those could be, anyone other than Bruce's. Eventually I was able to fall asleep with some made-up story that sounds only logical to someone up that late into the night. My brothers later both blamed me for the prints and I became a chore boy for my father because of it. Yet, those prints still haunted me, mostly because of how close they were to me. If there even was someone behind us, surely we would have heard the rustling of the plastic tarp. Now obviously I never told this story to anyone due to the fear of social suicide. I couldn't take those kinds of skeletons following me into high school. Nothing special happened the rest of the winter for my family. My father finally got a door onto the porch just in time for it to finally warm up. In those warm, sweaty nights, I prayed for the house to return to its freezing temperatures again. For most kids my age at that time, that meant going swimming, partying, and late night with girlfriends. For me and my brothers, that meant more time to help Dad. Long, grueling hours directly in the sun while working on houses for people whose cars were worth more than my entire family's net worth. After long drawn-out hours of orders being barked at by our father, our treat was to come home and either buck freshly harvested hay into our barn or tend to the animals. Yet after all of this, we always had a hearty meal cooked straight from my mother's hands ready for us at the end of the day. We'd eat till we couldn't pick up a fork, just to head to bed and do it all over again. On the rare occasions we had our days of freedom, my brothers and I would scatter across the town to our respective friend groups, occasionally meeting up at house parties or a bonfire. One of those nights we had off from working with our father, my brothers and I all piled into our older brother's truck and drove off to one of these great bonfire nights. It seemed as if the entire town would show up to these events. Family and friends alike would all show up in droves, the adults with the young ones would come out and eat and enjoy the social aspect. Later in the day, when the sun would try to set, the only ones left would be the teens trying to sneak a beer and the fun uncles supplying them. When we showed up, it was the typical crowd, the ones around my brother and their age with some parents still straggling around. When we stepped out of the truck, the remaining parents said what basically became our tagline anywhere we went, "Oh damn, here comes trouble." The parents and kids our age would laugh as we'd go and sit on the assortment of furniture and bench seats that surrounded the fire. We would all sit and chat with those who we were familiar with, all while those with more boldness than brains would try to sneak a beer from the coolers, myself included. All the night rolled on and more, the host's parents would give the same speech every parent would give to all of us kids at these events. Now I can't stop you from drinking, but don't be stupid and go off and drive as well, either sleep it off or call your parents. The phone's inside next to the fridge and don't you dare wake me up unless one of you is dying. They'd smile and wave goodnight as they'd head inside. We'd all say our thanks and commence to having the real party. The older ones would try to go and smoothly talk to one of the few women that show up, only to get shut down, walk to the cooler and plop down on one of the random chairs. I remember that night I was sitting down on some broken down bench seat with one of the springs jabbing into my side. Nonetheless, I would hold my beer and try to be as cool as I possibly could. People were conversing when my eyes were drawn to something near the tree line at the back of the property, something artificially white. Through swaying eyes I was able to focus on a figure standing there, blue jeans, white shirt, red hat. He had his hands to his side and it was too far away to make out a face. It took a bit before the thought finally pushed through my drunken mind. No way, I remember mumbling to myself quietly. My friend who was sitting next to me, who mind you was deep into telling me how in love he is with this girl that was across the fire, said annoyingly, "Are you even listening to me right now?" I didn't answer him but just kept staring back at the man, trying to believe this had to be some trick from the lighting and the shadows. My friend finally turned his head to look at what I was gawking at. "Who's that?" he asked. "I have no idea, but it kind of looks like that guy everyone was describing last summer though." "Dude, that was just a dumb rumor Johnny's parents came up with to dash," he retorted. "No, I know, but isn't it kinda weird some adult-looking dude is just standing far all the way out there? Plus isn't it just miles and miles of forest land back there? Where could he even come from?" I remember looking back at my friend confused. He stared back at me and you could almost see a glimmer of fear pass across his eyes. Our eyes narrowed and instantly, we both darted our heads back to the tree line. Nothing. Just the outline of trees and darkness. Suddenly that fire didn't feel so warm and the cool summer air just felt plain cold. Our eyes searched across the trees trying to get a glimpse of what we just saw, but there honestly wasn't anything but trees and trees. We turned back to each other and that fear became something more closer to confusion. We both knew it had only been a second or so that our eyes were off of him yet, there was no trace of him. We looked around the fire to see if anyone had seen what we just had, yet everyone seemed too deep into conversation to notice or care. Then, to almost cut the tension that lingered in the air, my oldest brother grasped both of my shoulders. Instantly I leaped and stiffened all up. My brother mockingly said something along the lines of, "What? Still scared of the dark, pussy?" I laughed it off and said something vulgar back to him. He told me that our other brother was still trying to get lucky so he'd be spending the night here. My oldest brother was going to go home and he asked if I wanted to go home as well. My oldest brother wasn't much of a drinker, so I knew at the very least this'd be a good chance to get home safe instead of sleeping in some field. Him and I both got into his pickup and we waved goodbye to the remaining few. We drove off back down the road all while music played from the late-night radio. By the time we had gotten home, that lingering eeriness that I felt had all but left. I thanked my brother for the ride and went to lie down on the couch, not having the energy to crawl upstairs and into my bed. As the night's events faded into memories, the obvious remained painted on the inner of my eyelids. That man standing out in the tree line, watching us like he was one of the trees. That same chill I felt crawled its way up my spine as my mind slipped into unconsciousness. It's getting pretty late while writing this. I have work in the morning and it's hard to try and condense and remember stories from so much time ago. I've been trying to spice up my words and storytelling to the best of my ability without exaggerating the actual story of this. I have much more to tell about Bruce and a lot more interesting stories, but for now I'd like to get some rest. If you would like to hear more stories about my childhood, please let me know. Again, if you have any questions about Bruce or my childhood, I will do my best to answer them. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I hope it doesn't sound terrible, but it's been ample years since I've been in any type of school and writing has never been my strong suit, lol. Again, thank you. I'll try to post this on my lunch break tomorrow at work.